last fall, I was asked to participate in something called TEDx Columbus. Does everybody know what TED stands for? Yes? No? Can you get some blood stairs? Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And there were several different groups that spoke at that conference that day. I was asked to talk about community. But there were several people who converged on that stage that day, and I want to give you a little backdrop because my presentation today really has evolved out of that conversation. There was a young man by the name of Bol Awang, hopefully I got that right, and he works at a Walmart warehouse, but he's also a painter, and he's also one of the Sudanese Lost Boys. And so he got up on stage and did a presentation about his journey of getting from Sudan to Columbus, Ohio. And he walked the equivalent distance of what it would be like to walk from Columbus, Ohio to Denver, Colorado. And through his own artwork, he told this story of the journey of what happened the day his village was attacked and his family literally scattered into the countryside. Several members of his family he has never seen since that day. So he makes it to Columbus, and he wants to go to Ohio State University, and he's charged out-of-state tuition. And there was someone in the registrar's office that said, we can't charge this young man out-of-state tuition. He's someone without a country. Well, another presenter that day was a woman by the name of Megan Jones, and she lives in the Hilltop and is attending the Battelle Metro High School. And when she got up on stage, you thought she was going to talk about just the normal stuff a 17 or 18-year-old would want to talk about. Friends, shopping, hanging out. And about 2 minutes into her presentation, when she started to talk about the viscosity of some glucose derivative that she invented that's now being used, I thought, she is way over my head. Well, her dad works at the Walmart warehouse, where Bol works. But the dad didn't know Bol's story. He was just some guy that works in the warehouse, right? So this relationship, how about these two people are connected, not by geography, not by neighborhood, not by family relationship, was unknown. Because there was Mr. Jones, very proud of his daughter, sitting in the audience, and had no idea one of his guys that works in the warehouse was going to be up on stage. What also happens is that the woman in the registrar's office attended the conference that day and didn't know Bol was one of the presenters on the TED lineup. And so it was very interesting to me to see how all these different layers of what Columbus is today were unfolding live on stage. And it also said to me that Columbus is a very different city than the one that many of us have grown up in. How many of you are lifelong Columbus residents? Raise your hand. So maybe a third, 25%. And that's typical for any time I'm with a group. I grew up in Youngstown, and the background for my story is I'm a lover of cities and statistics and buildings. And when I was 13, my parents gave me the Ohio Almanac. And I was very impressed with what I read in those pages. Because Columbus was the only city that was growing. And when I was 13, this was right after all the mills closed in Youngstown. And the whole community fell apart. So I came to Ohio State and did a degree in city planning, but I'm more about the mortar between the bricks and sticks, which is how we hold our communities together. So as a lover of statistics and maps, I'm going to throw a lot of stuff at you today, most all of which you already know, because I probably have never spoken to a group that is on the front lines the way you all are. So you see these changes every day, and probably a lot of this will not be a surprise to you, but maybe in the continuity in which I deliver it, it might be new. So with that, let's go on a little trip. You're teachers, so we have to have a pop quiz, right? So, just shout out your answers if you know them. The first question, in which census did Columbus officially become Ohio's largest city? C. Very good. In 1990, Columbus officially became the largest city by passing Cleveland. Next, which group represents Columbus's largest immigrant communities by population size? C.
Must be B then.
Yep, it's B. According to the 2010 census, the largest immigrant communities in Columbus are Latino, followed by Asian, followed by African, and that's in population size. Next. According to the 2010 census, we are still the 15th largest city in the U.S., but one city jumped ahead of us, and we jumped ahead of another city. Can you name the city that jumped Columbus, and can you name the city that we jumped? This is a tough one. This is one of those open-ended questions. Well, you're in the right state. Who said San Antonio? Think of it, another city with music. Austin. And the other city is very near us. Go north. They make a lot of cars. Detroit, you got it. So in fact, Austin, Texas leapt past Columbus with considerable growth, but Detroit, which is shrinking faster than anyone had ever thought, Columbus is now larger than the Motor City just to the north. So, ranked from largest to smallest, these three cities in land area. Not population size, but land. This one might be tough. Want to try it?
Columbus, Detroit, Chicago.
I heard Columbus, Detroit, Chicago. Okay. In fact, would you be surprised to know that Columbus and Chicago are exactly the same size to the 10th of a square mile? Detroit is only 143 square miles. And last, which of these cities do you think Columbus is actually growing faster than? And this would be the metropolitan region. Which cities do you think we're growing faster than?
San Diego.
Okay.
Seattle.
Okay. Would anybody like to guess that Columbus is growing faster than all of them? These are cities that we traditionally think of being high-growth cities that are on the cutting edge, but in fact, our little burg in the middle of the Midwest is growing faster than all of them. So, the census gives us a rare opportunity to look at our city. And I'm going to go back to this 1990 movie. Don't know if anyone ever saw it. It was a oh, you saw it? Yeah, all right. Not so many people have seen this movie. I love it. Stockard Channing, and you can kind of get the feel of this presentation. We're going to have a little bit of fun, so please feel to be interactive with me. It was a comedy about a family of insects living in the Amazon rainforest, and they're concerned about global warming. So they come to the United States, and they take a human form, and they want to begin to dismantle the overconsumption of American ways and actually dismantle an American power plant. And the way for them to do this is to become a very statistically average American family. So dad is a middle management position. Mom is actually a traditional stay-at-home mom. This is, again, 1990. And they have two kids, a boy and a girl. They get B's in school, live in a suburban house, and have a pet dog. And you want to know where they live? In a fictitious town called Median, Ohio, a Columbus suburb, because there's a scene where Ed Begley Jr. looks at census data and finds that Columbus, Ohio is the most average place in America. Right? This was really our claim to fame. You know, when people talk about Columbus as a test market town, they called us a test market town because our claim to fame was we're really average. But the 2010 census gives us an opportunity to take a look at ourselves. And folks, the changes we have had over the last 10 years have shocked a lot of people who even pay attention to this. So let's jump into that data. So this map is of the United States, of every single county. There's 3,157 counties in the U.S., and the red, and this will be a common theme, red shows population decline, blue shows population growth. What you'll see in the center of the slide are the blue areas of central Ohio. You can see that we really start to stand out across the United States. But you also saw this huge, deep population of the American grasslands. This is the same data presented in a different way. Every county growing faster than national average is in blue. Every county growing slower than national average is in red. Yet again, you see how Columbus Metro really stands out. This is a map that shows a relationship of Franklin County to other counties in the country between 2000 and 2010. This represents every place that someone in Columbus, or Franklin County, I should say, moved to, or someone moved from to Franklin County. So you can see in a decade, every single county in Ohio had some form of mobility in and out of Franklin County. You see this eastern seaboard and a Florida and then a west coast relationship with Columbus. Now we're going to dive right into the state. Again, blue showing growth, red showing decline. And you see the central Ohio counties, Franklin County in the middle, really stands out across the state. In fact, the other urban counties, Lucas, Cuyahoga, Trumbull and Mahoning, and Hamilton and Montgomery, are actually showing population loss, but they're showing growth in the suburban counties, which is really happening at the expense of what's happening in the cities. The only other urban county that performed fairly well was Summit, which actually just pretty much broke even. Some of that was suburbanization out of Cleveland. So let's talk about what Columbus's experience has been the last 30 years relative to the rest of the state. I'm going to show you 3 bar charts. This shows what Metro Columbus population growth did in the 1980s. So this is the 7 counties of metropolitan Columbus. These are the remaining 81 counties of the state. So you can see that in the 1980s, when we were still losing lots of manufacturing jobs, Columbus added 130,000 people. The rest of the state lost about 80,000. Well, the 1990s was a really great economic period. And Ohio recovered as the national economy recovered. Did everybody see the headline yesterday about poverty in the United States is now at an all-time high, right? But did you notice in that chart in the paper where they showed what was happening with the poverty rate throughout the entire 1990s? It was going down every single year from 93 to 2000, and then everything started to change after the attacks of September 11th. Well, the 1990s was really good for Ohio, and in fact, Columbus grew faster in the 1990s, but the rest of the state really recovered. Well, this is what happened the last decade. Pretty much was the 1980s again, right? But look what happened in Columbus. During a very troubled decade, Columbus actually grew faster, right? So the point of this is it doesn't really matter what's happening in Ohio, good times or bad, Columbus's growth seems to be inconsistent with what's happening in the rest of Ohio. So I wanted to take a look at what's happening here. So part of that TEDx event, I wanted to answer the question, so where are people moving to Columbus from? Well, we added about 230,000 people in the last decade. However, only 54,000 of the 230,000 people we added were because people left one city and came to our city, which is considered domestic migration, which is any kind of mobility pattern within the United States. Columbus is the only region of Ohio where more people are moving into than out of with relationship to what's happening with American citizens. The other issue with Franklin County was this was the very first decade ever that the white population in Franklin County experienced a population loss. This has never happened since we've been collecting census data. The white population of Franklin County fell 1%. But what was interesting is the white population is growing in this L shape along Broad Street and the High Street corridor as households are moving back into those urban neighborhoods, particularly higher income white households, most likely without children, tends to be the case. Significant population losses again along the Cleveland Avenue corridor. This is Cleveland Avenue, this is Morse Road, and then portions of the east side of the city. This is the racial demographics of our county between 2000 and 2010. You'll see significant change in the diversity of our community as there is an increase in population among all of the other racial groups except white. How many of you have been teaching in Columbus schools for more than a decade? Raise your hand. How come you're all on this side of the room? You guys almost hang out together. So Northland is probably one of those locations that has experienced the most significant change. I heard someone say they teach at Northland, right? There are a few. Okay. So this was Northland Mall back when it opened, and of course it was the mecca for Columbus shopping. And I'm sure we all remember what happened to Northland when it looked like this. And there were lots of fears about what was going to happen to the entire Northland community because of the close of Northland Mall. This was a picture of Northland Mall on its very last day. And in fact, some of those predictions came true. The census tract in which Northland sits had one of the largest percentage decreases in population in the city of Columbus. It lost significantly more than 10% of its population, some of which was due to the loss of rental housing, as some of the apartment complexes closest to the mall really suffered after the close of the mall. But there's this phrase, down but not out. A funny thing started to happen along Morse Road in the last 10 years, and as the businesses leapfrogged, as they picked up and moved further out, they didn't stay vacant for long. And one of the things that's so amazing to me about the Morse Road corridor is you don't see many vacancies, but what you see are very, very different businesses. My best example is Global Mall. And please raise your hand for those of you that have been inside Global Mall. Okay. Would anybody like to tell me what you see inside? Everything, okay?
Little shops.
but it has a particular focus, right? Do you remember what Global Mall used to be? This was TJ Maxx. So TJ Maxx moved to Easton, as that development leapfrogs further out, and rather than having a vacant big box store, we now have Global Mall, which probably has 24 different local businesses inside. It's a different kind of shopping experience, but the neighborhood is changing, and in my opinion, revitalizing in very interesting ways. The Somali community did not originally select Columbus as its original destination when it came to the United States. But Columbus was selected because of low-cost housing, readily accessible jobs, and a very welcoming environment. And this experience was very organic. I want you to remember whether there were any incentives or marketing campaigns that made Columbus attractive to this population, and there simply weren't. I worked for the city in the development department in the 1990s, mid-1990s, and this was simply not on our radar. But the city went from 900 Somalis to somewhere between 25 to 40,000, depending upon who you talk to. This is a map that shows census tracts and the geography of African-born residents in our community. Again, here's the Morse Road corridor. This probably wouldn't surprise any of you, but according to the American Community Survey, there are 21,000 African-born residents in our community. Community Research Partners estimates that that number actually could be anywhere from 18,000 to close to 40,000. The other thing on Morse Road is the Lamico Cana grocery store. How many of you have been inside this grocery store? Okay. I highly recommend it. This was the former Sun TV. The owner of this chain, his first name is Laborio, now has 9 Lamico Cana grocery stores in Franklin County, and in 2001 he had none, which is a huge indication of the change of our community. Northwest Franklin County also saw significant changes. This was the high-growth corridor of the 1990s, and while growth slowed, it also began to change. This is the center of where the Asian community has been locating in Columbus, and in fact, on these maps, blue shows growth, red shows population decline. Some of those areas are declining because that was the center of the Asian community, and now residents of that community are just migrating out to other neighborhoods. But you see that the distribution is throughout Franklin County, and it is very diverse from country of origin. In fact, 46,000 Asians now live in Franklin County. In our metro, there are 57,000 Asians. This was an increase of 56% in just a decade. Huge change for our community. If you have not taken a look, last time you were down Bethel Road, I highly recommend you take a look at the storefronts and the businesses in all of the shopping centers along Bethel Road. They're very different than what they were just 10 years ago. My favorite, Golden Delights Bakery. Does anybody, oh, you'd like it? Yeah, the strawberry cake, right? Yeah, everybody knows the strawberry cake. Has anybody gone inside the CAM International Market at Olentangy Plaza? This is the plaza that has Marshall's, Micro Center, and Kmart, right? A couple people raised their hands. Was that you, Doreen? And what did you find when you went in there?
Amazing Asian food selection.
This used to be one of the Sunflower Market locations. It is a full-service grocery store, almost as large as your neighborhood Kroger or Giant Eagle could be, but the entire grocery store is nothing but products from China. I was also surprised because everything in the store is now bilingual. The signage on the outside of the building, the signage in the store. The seasoning aisle was as long as any cereal aisle at your grocery store, and it's just seasonings from around the world. And when I went in there, I pretended like I knew what I was doing, but I certainly didn't. The Asian population in Columbus is skyrocketing. In fact, you can see in this chart relative to the other Ohio markets, we had the largest Asian population in the 2000 census, but our growth rate over the last 10 years is certainly eclipsing those of our nearby cities as well. West Side. Some of you I heard are teaching on the West Side. Well, here's Westland Mall. I don't know when the last time any of you went inside Westland Mall, but it certainly has seen its better days. But again, businesses on the West Side really started to change. This is just one of the taco trucks on the West Side. There's actually a website now called tacotruckscolumbus.com where you can track on an interactive map the location of 35 different taco trucks around the city. But it's also an indication of the business development opportunities that we're having in Columbus. And the national retailers are also noticing this as well. It was really interesting when I just took a day to drive around the city and started to notice national chain retailers having multiple different languages. And I heard someone teaches at the International High School. Where was that? So no surprise to you, but it's certainly a surprise, particularly when you have friends that have left Columbus just a decade ago and they've come back. They've definitely noticed these changes. Here's a map that shows the growth of the Latino population in Franklin County. What you'll notice are there were only a few census tracts that saw population loss, but the growth of the Latino community was really felt across the entire city. A lot of folks think that the Latino population is very much just on the west side. In fact, it is all over Franklin County, and the Latino population increased 132% in just a decade. This adds up to nearly 121,000 foreign-born residents living in our community, more than half of which have come in the last decade. That is not a pattern happening anywhere else in the state of Ohio. And if you look at what's happening in Columbus on a historical chart, we are back to where we were over 100 years ago. When William McKinley was president and Albert Einstein invented the theory of relativity, was the last time that Columbus had this percentage of its community that was born outside the United States. This is not an Ohio phenomenon. This is a Franklin County phenomenon that is not being felt in any one of the other 87 counties. There are increases in international populations in other cities, but nowhere close to what's happening in Columbus. We're very unique in that sense. So I'll close with this. I just want you to think about these trends. Again, I know that you face these every single day in your schools, but what are these demographic changes? These new resident arrivals from nearby cities of Cleveland or Dayton or from more exotic locations. What does it mean to be in neighborhoods that are gentrifying? Godman Guild Association said to me recently that they left Harrison West because all of the families in need left Victorian Village and Harrison West. And so Godman Guild moved to Wyland Park. So there's concerns if Wyland Park gentrifies. I don't think that's going to happen. We're building lots of moderate and low-income housing for families in that neighborhood. But Godman Guild says, are we going to have to pick up and move as well? Right? But what does it mean if your neighborhood used to be middle class and it's fallen into poverty? How has that changed the demographics of your schools? The huge increases in poverty are troubling. I hope this changes when the economy turns around. But I also want you to realize what's happening in your neighborhoods is also a function of sprawl that is impacting our entire region. So what's happening in Linden isn't just a Linden phenomenon. What's happening in Linden is also because of what's happening in Licking and Fairfield and Delaware counties. There is a direct relationship between what's happening in parts of our community and what's happening out on our fringe. So thank you for your attention in the darkness, and I probably went on long. So thank you.